So hi everyone, welcome to today's Safe Space training. The session is being recorded and please make sure that your microphones are muted except when you are asking a question. You're welcome to interrupt us at any time to ask questions, and you're also welcome to ask those questions in the chat as well. I will see them. I am monitoring the chat, and so I will see your questions. And if you want to ask a question anonymously, you're also welcome to message me directly. I usually just say someone has asked such and such question, in case you have a question, but you're uncomfortable having your name attached to your question. This is a safe space and it is a brave space. So please ask any questions that come up to you, even if you're not sure if it's offensive or not. We're not easily offended. We are here to educate. So thank you, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. Next slide. So my name is Arian Reed. A lot of people also call me Ari for short, and my pronouns are he, him, his. I am the Allied Staff and Faculty Association president, also our one and only past president, also our association co-founder, and I have also been sitting on a lot of different LGBTQ related committees across the United States, across California, I should say, including the annual LGBTQ Summit, also some local organizations like the LGBTQ Out for Mental Health Task Force, and just a lot, and also some advisory boards, etc. So I've been in this field for a long time. I also am the original co-coordinator of this program. I started with Jerry a few years ago. Jerry asked me to join him on this. And this program really has a lot of meaning for me because it was during a safe space program that I learned my identity as a trans man. And we'll go over what that means later on. But I've been doing this for a few years and I'm really happy to keep doing this. And although it was a very difficult decision for Jerry, he did decide to retire. He has allowed Liz to come on as our new program coordinator and take over for him. This was his baby. He created the Safe Space program here at Fresno City College as part of a sabbatical. And this always had been very close to his heart. So it was a very difficult decision to let someone else take over for a while. So thank you so much, Liz, for being here. I'll let Liz introduce herself.
Thanks, Arian. Yes, I'm Liz Adams. I'm an engineering instructor here at Fresno City College, and I am really excited to be part of this program. This is important to me for a lot of reasons. I've been an LGBTQ ally trainer in STEM specifically since 2015. And as a woman in engineering, I have, experienced that feeling of exclusion, of being the other. And I feel that, it's really important that we're able to provide an inclusive, welcoming environment where all of our students feel comfortable being themselves. And the more work that I put into this, the more I've learned that when we make changes for one group, it really makes it better for everybody. So I'm really glad that you're all here, and I'm very excited to be a part of this program. And and we'll just go ahead and dive right in. All right.
So some people may ask, what is the Safe Space Ally program? So for those of you who haven't heard of us, we are a campus-wide network of employees and students who have voluntarily taken this training. So no one is required to take this training. This is totally voluntarily. You're welcome to leave at any time if you feel uncomfortable with this training or anything that we have to say. You are not required to be here, but you are required to be here the whole time if you do want to become a certified Safe Space Ally. Throughout this training, you will learn a little bit about the LGBTQ community and why, and this program, the whole point of this program is to make this campus more inclusive for everybody by making us all a little bit more understanding of LGBTQ identities and what it means to be LGBTQ and how to be respectful to someone who is LGBTQ. So we will not become experts. None of us are going to leave here experts, not even us in this, but what we we'll be doing is kind of illuminating a lot of the basics for you. And so being an ally through our program just means that you're someone who's taken this training, and so you have a little bit of understanding. And you also have some resources, which we will be providing to you after this training. And that's really all it means. It does not mean that you are an expert. Please, when you're done, if you want to be a visible ally, a certified ally, please complete our ally agreement. It's a little PDF. You just have to sign it saying that you will be an ally to the LGBTQ community. And once you sign that and return that to us, we will then give you a sticker, and that ally sticker allows you to display your allyship to students. We recently just changed our logo, and so we have brand new stickers. If you've already received a sticker before, because you are certified from years before, you will receive a new sticker once I get around to sending those out to everybody. And if you're taking this for the first time, then you get to have that brand new sticker first off. So you just have to complete that agreement, and then we'll get that to you pretty soon. So some people ask, why do we need a safe space program? So thank you, Liz. As many of us may know, but some of us might not, the Fresno area has been a very conservative area since its inception, and that continues today. And we've been rated on the Human Rights Campaign's Municipal Equality Index as below average pretty much every single year, except for 1 year when we had a local organization that was doing some good work, but unfortunately they closed down, and so that dropped our rating. But what that equality index means is they come and they look at our municipal laws, they look at our local organizations, businesses, our businesses offering health insurance as inclusive of all employees. It's a lot. They look at a lot of different things, and they figure out whether it is an area that is safe for LGBTQ people to live and thrive. Getting an average rating basically just means you are not hostile, but does not mean that you are affirming or a good place for LGBTQ people to live and to work and to thrive. So the fact that we are below average is a pretty bad sign. Also, you should be aware of the fact that a few percent of the population at large is LGBTQ, and this is across all demographics. But if we look at certain demographics, for instance, millennials, about 20% of millennials are identifying openly as LGBTQ. About 24% of Generation Z are identifying as LGBTQ. And as you may be thinking, this is going to be a lot of our students. We do have some older students, but these generations are going to be where a lot of our students are from. Next slide.
Yeah, so just to really add on to why this is important work that we're doing, you may or may not be aware of the experience of the LGBTQ population globally. What this map shows is LGBTQ rights around the world, and being LGBTQ is criminalized in the pink countries that are shown here and is punishable by death in the red countries, which is a little bit unbelievable, but the truth. And even though we may live and work in one of the more friendly, progressive green countries, we still have students who go on to work for companies and corporations who do business globally and will do work in these other countries. So, it's important to think about how do we, how are these companies able to protect their employees when they travel to other countries, or if they're working with hostile countries? Are they able to travel with their families? How do they even ask for protection within their company if they are not comfortable being out at work? So just to raise awareness on what the reality is globally. And here, bringing it to the United States, looking at the climate for LGBTQ population within the United States, we can see that only about 40, maybe a little more than 40% of people, and thereby LGBTQ people, live in states currently that prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. So that leaves, almost half of the population, or more than half of the population, even living in states that have none of these rights and do not prohibit workplace discrimination based on sexual identity and orientation. So what that means is that you can be fired in these states just for being LGBTQ. So we still have a long way to go and a lot of work to do. And we have an example also from here in Fresno from just 4 years ago. This student was harassed and assaulted on her 16th birthday. And what's important to notice about this is local. This is only about 4 years ago. So it's likely that the students who harassed and assaulted this student here are our students, are on our campus. And so this is something that, we need to work with our students on understanding, and we need to build this compassionate and empathetic network to improve and not see these types of behaviors. And we've seen it on our campus. So this is a sign that was posted on a gender neutral bathroom on our campus, and someone vandalized it, scratched out this note that people who are transgender, genderqueer, and added what I consider to be a dehumanizing comment asking, what even is that? And then over on the right, some sort of slur. And so we can see that we have this this attitude and this type of behavior even on the Fresno City College campus. All right.
Yeah, so thank you. And you can go ahead and Liz and click through all the things for this slide. So among youth, how do I want to say it? So among youth who have considered LGBTQ youth who have considered suicide, a lot of them are transgender, non-binary, and as you can see, within the general population, only about 17% of youth actually ever consider suicide, versus the LGBTQ population, where among our cisgender LGBTQ people, we have almost double that rate. And then if you look specifically at people with different types of gender identity, such as transgender and non-binary, we are several times that rate. And we also experience a lot of generalized anxiety, much higher rates than the cisgender population, than the non-LGBTQ population. We also, especially when you look at like transgender, non-binary youth, we especially are susceptible to the depressive disorders, to attempting suicide, and to engaging in self-harm practices. Next slide. But despite all those facts, being LGBTQ is not the same thing as being suicidal. Just because we are one does not mean we are the other. But there's the reason for the high correlation is because about 6 out of 10 youth have said that someone has attempted to change their sexual orientation or gender identity. And about 1 out of every 3 of us have reported that we've been physically harmed or threatened at some point in our lifetime due to our sexual orientation or our gender identity. So when you think about how much we go through, some of us on a daily basis, all that isolation from others, because oftentimes, especially among the trans and non-binary populations, we're often isolated from other people because people don't know where to put us, on the girls' team or the boys' team, in their rooms, locker rooms, etc., or by ourselves. And so oftentimes we are isolated, oftentimes we are alienated, oftentimes our peers alienate us from them. And all these different factors come together to create a situation in which we are much more likely to ideate suicide than someone who is not LGBTQ. Next slide. So let's go over some terminology so you can really understand exactly what we're trying to tell you. So queer is a word that it's kind of a big umbrella term for the entire LGBTQ community. It's basically like the word LGBTQ, but with fewer syllables. And this is a term that has had it has had a derogatory connotation with it, but it has been reclaimed by the LGBTQ community. to refer to people, to anyone who transgresses the culturally imposed norms of heterosexuality and gender traditionalism. So it basically can mean anyone who is LGBTQ, and it's kind of like our N word, where you don't necessarily, you shouldn't really be saying that word unless that word applies to you. Because this is our oppression that we are reclaiming when we use this word. This word was reclaimed during the ACT UP movement when there wasn't when there's a lot of miscommunication and misinformation about HIV. ACT UP was a queer organization that stood up and used the word queers to get people's attention, especially the attention of people who are LGBTQ, to spread awareness about what HIV really is and how it actually is transmitted and treated, etc. So that's kind of where it started becoming less of a derogatory term used against us and more of us using that term ourselves. But again, if you don't identify as queer, please don't use that term. Next slide.
Thanks, Arian. Yeah, so we want to get into some more terms and vocabulary, and it can be a lot all at once. The LGBTQ acronym represents diversity in sex, in gender, and in orientation. And so what does that mean, right? And so the first thing that we want to impress or start to think about is that those are three separate things. Sex, gender, and orientation are three separate things. And so I want to kind of start with sex and gender. Sex is assigned at birth, sometimes before birth, and it's based on anatomy. And in many cases, sex characteristics are clear and consistent, but not always. There's that's not always the case. Gender, on the other hand, is really a social construct, right? So these are roles and behaviors that a certain society considers appropriate for men and women. So sex and gender are two different things, but they're very often used interchangeably. Now, let me go to the next slide. So cisgender is a term that I'm sure you've heard. And when sex and gender align, a person is cisgender. When sex and gender do not align, then a person is transgender. So the reality is that both sex and gender, exist on a spectrum. They're not confined to binary classifications. And so our goal, or one of our goals in today's training, is that by the end of the presentation, it's a lot clearer to everyone that gender is less like this pink and blue representation at the top of the slide, and really more of a hodgepodge of different identities like shown here on the bottom. And we'll talk about orientation in a few slides, but I'm going to turn this back over to Arian.
So a lot of people mistake the word trans as just being a short term for transgender, but it's actually a big umbrella term for a lot of different identities. And it basically means anyone whose gender identity and or gender expression differs from the sex that they were assigned at birth. So in other words, if you were born with male genitalia and you were called, it's a boy, and you identify throughout your life as a boy, you are cisgender. But if, for instance, you were born with any kind of genitalia and you don't identify with the gender that is normally associated with that, if you were born with male genitalia, but you feel like you're not a man, or that you are a woman, or that you don't even have a gender, then you're going to be some kind of, your gender identity will fall under the term of trans. Under the trans umbrella, we have two smaller umbrellas. We have the transgender umbrella and we have the non-binary umbrella. So under the trans umbrella, this is just an umbrella term for two different terms, transgender man and transgender woman. So a transgender man is someone who was assigned female at birth. And we say assigned because we did not choose that, God or biology or whatever you believe in, that chose us. We did not ask to be born as male or female, we just were. But we actually identify inside as men and real women. We have always felt this way our whole lives, even when we couldn't articulate to other people. And so a transgender man is someone who's assigned female at birth, and transgender woman is a woman who is assigned male at birth. Non-binary is kind of a new term, and it used to be genderqueer, but nowadays a lot of people are using non-binary, and it's basically a giant umbrella for a bunch of different terms. It really depends on the year. A couple years ago, as many as 200 different terms were being used. As of last year, about only 100 of those survived. So it sounds like the younger population has kind of figured out which terms they like more than others. And it's basically a giant umbrella for every gender identity that does not align with the binary of male versus female. So it's going to be people who feel like they are that they have two genders or three genders, or they're kind of between genders. You know, they don't necessarily identify as more of a man or a woman. They're kind of somewhere in between. Or maybe they don't even feel like they have a gender, etc. So that's going to be a big umbrella for a lot of different terms. Next slide. So as I said before, you know, actually, I'm just going to go straight forward to the fact that transgender it's an adjective only. So keep in mind that we do not use it like a verb or noun. So we don't say a transgender. We don't say transgendered because the past tense just sounds so weird to us because it's not like we ever stop being transgender, right? You know, once you realize you're transgender, you realize you've always been that way, even if you didn't know that, even if you didn't have this language to give to other people to express who you are. It's who you were. It's who you are and who you will always be, to at least some extent. Unless you realize some people occasionally think that they are transgender and then kind of realize maybe they're really not, or maybe they're kind of more non-binary, etc. But you know, for 99% of the people who identify as transgender, we always were and we always are. So down here below, I have some pictures because a lot of people, when they hear the word transgender, they only think of transgender women. Um, so that would be the person on the right-hand side of your screen. But a lot of people don't think about transgender men, the person on the left-hand side of the screen, because we are often not mentioned as much in media. We don't get as much attention in the media and in general. So a lot of people, if they have even heard of this word. Oftentimes, a transgender woman is the only person they think of, but there are also transgender men who we are also fully capable of transition as well. Next slide. So we're not here to be experts on all the different non-binary terms. I'm just going to throw some of the major ones at you. So we have androgynous, someone who kind of feels that they are neither male or female. They're kind of like somewhere in the middle. Gender fluid, a lot of these terms are how they sound. So gender fluid is going to be someone who feels that their gender is very fluid. It changes, and that change can occur over the course of hours. It can be over the course of years. It depends on the individual. Agender is someone who feels that they do not have a particular gender, and gender nonconforming is someone who may have a gender but does not conform to the roles assigned to that gender by that society. So for instance, I identify as gender nonconforming because although I identify as a man, I still like dresses sometimes, I still like makeup. I don't feel tied down to the societal norms based on either gender, the one I was born as or the one that I really am. You know, so that's kind of what gender nonconforming means. And a lot of people are using that term, so it's good to understand that term. And like I said earlier, genderqueer it's basically a lot like the term non-binary that basically was the term for all these different identities before all these different identities became a thing. So once that term came into effect, we kind of don't necessarily use it as much anymore. And it also has more of a political context behind it, etc. So, but there are still a lot of people, especially among the older generations, who use that term. Next slide.
Okay, so we've talked quite a bit now about sex and gender, and now we want to talk about orientation. And orientation refers to who we are attracted to, and this is usually based on a gender relationship. So I'm sure you're familiar with the term gay, and this is a term used to describe a man who is physically, emotionally attracted to the same sex, and it's sometimes used to refer to women as well. lesbian is a term used to describe women who are physically, emotionally attracted to the same sex. And both of these terms can be used to describe same gender relationships, not necessarily just same sex relationships. So yeah, so there's a kind of a lot to take in there. And there's more.
Can I interrupt you real quick?
Yeah, you want to go?
Yeah, so there is a question in the chat that I just saw. Someone said, my son is trans and the director of the Queer Alliance at UC Berkeley and uses the term queer as common language, question mark. So I just wanted to let you know, yes, some people do use it very easily. I'm one of those people. The younger generation in general tends to use that term very easily because we haven't typically, a lot of us haven't had that term used against us before. We grew up in an era where that term wasn't really being used so much. It's kind of other words were used against us, so there's other words that may trigger us. But especially among the older LGBTQ people, that term is going to be offensive a lot of the time to a lot of them. There's some of them, some older LGBTQ people who feel that that term is offensive. They don't like hearing that word from anyone, even someone who identifies as queer. They just do not like that word. It's very triggering for them. It's very sensitive for them. We have people here on our campus, who identify as LGBTQ and who find that term offensive. So we do have to be mindful of that fact and careful about how we use that term. And so that's why I say only people who identify as queer should use that term, because when someone does feel triggered by that term and says, hey, don't use that term, I don't like that, you can say, well, I identify with it, so I'm sorry, but that was the reason why I was using it. And then and that is a much less embarrassing circumstance to be in than to be that person who's like, oh, I'm sorry, I thought it was okay. So that's why I cautioned against using that term. Thank you. Go ahead, Liz.
Okay, thanks, Arian. There's also a question in the chat about appropriate survey options for gender, and the ones that I'm most familiar with are as an right. So you have male, female, and then just other or prefer not to answer. Arian, do you have a?
Yeah, so a much better way of that, a much better way of asking for people's gender without othering the trans population would be to just have a blank fill-in box where we just self-report our own gender. So we can just type that in, whatever it is, because there are up to 100 different terms being used, and you don't necessarily have room in your survey for 100 answers. So what we really prefer is just to have a self-identifying box.
Okay, and put in there a non-binary as an option?
Yeah, so non-binary is a great option. If you do have to give options, if you can't allow for a write-in field, please do allow for, male, female, non-binary. A lot of people will put other or, prefer to self-identify. And so then they'll kind of have the main categories and then also a self-identifying box. It's kind of up to, the needs of your survey and how your data is being collected from that survey. Some people need that data to be scannable and put into boxes, but unfortunately, you are going to lose a lot of people's correct gender identities because a lot of us just don't fit neatly into boxes.
Sure. Okay, thank you. So coming back to our slides and the concept of orientation, we talked briefly about gay and lesbian terms. Some folks are bisexual, and meaning that they are physically and emotionally attracted to both men and women. And this attraction is not necessarily split 50-50 right down the middle. There may be a preference for one over the other, but it doesn't prevent someone from having a successful relationship with either of the sex genders. So that's bisexual, which is different than the term pansexual, which describes a person who is attracted to all or many different gender expressions. So pansexual as opposed to bisexual, really sort of includes the whole middle part of the spectrum, the whole spectrum, whereas bisexual is more binary. And there is also asexual. So some folks are asexual, which is a term used to describe someone who is does not experience physical attraction, but can be capable, like it says, of emotional attraction. And then this slide makes me think of also a term that is pretty new to me, which is aromantic, which describes someone who has little or no romantic attraction to others. So, but doesn't really describe, they may or may not have a physical attraction with that. So again, there are a lot of terms. And on our next slide, Arian's going to take and is going to kind of bring everything together, summarize all of this with the genderbread person.
So genderbread person is here to help us kind of break all these things down, because we just threw a lot of terminology at you. And for some of you, this might be your first time hearing a lot of these terms, and you might just feel overwhelmed. So we're going to try to less overwhelm you right now and try to help all these things make sense. So gender identity is going to be who you really are inside. So that's going to be whether you have that innate feeling that you are a man, or that feeling that you are a woman. That's all that means. It has nothing to do with, preferences for pink over blue or anything like that. It's literally just that feeling inside that you are a man or a woman. Gender expression is going to be how you express your gender. So that's where, for instance, gender nonconforming comes in, because you can identify as a man, but still enjoy wearing dresses, or you can identify as a woman, but still enjoy, wearing men's pants and clothes that are marketed to men, and not like makeup. These things, none of these things on this chart in front of you are connected to each other at all. These are all independent variables, and just because one turns out to be a different definition, or just because one person turns out to be different in one of these ways than you expected, doesn't mean that other things about them are different. So just because someone comes out to you as being trans or as being gay, etc., does not mean that they, for instance, just because someone comes out to you as a lesbian does not mean that she is going to start dressing more masculine. Doesn't mean that she now identifies as a man just because she's attracted to women, etc. None of these things are connected. Biological sex is going to be your body. It will be your chromosomes, or it could be the genitalia that you were born with. It can mean a lot of different things. And for a lot of us, especially among the trans population, biological sex isn't even fixed for us, because we kind of change some of those things sometimes, depending on how much we felt we needed to in order to present our actual gender to the world, and to live authentically as our true gender. So this is kind of a complicated term. In the United States, there's no set term as to this is what biological sex means. It kind of means different things to different people, and to different industries, the medical industry versus the legal industry, etc. It's going to have different terms, different people are going to assign more weight to certain aspects of what it must mean. So it's kind of complicated. Sexual orientation is also pretty complicated, because some people will use terms like bisexual, but they're also attracted to people who are non-binary. And as we saw, bisexuality means that you're attracted to men versus women. And sometimes people use these terms and because they feel differently about the definition of the term than what we're telling you, because we're just kind of telling you what is nationally accepted, what is most commonly used across the United States, but none of these things are necessarily like set in stone. This is culture, and culture isn't necessarily black and white. It's all kinds of diversity. And so we're just trying to impart to you the most common ways that people define all of these terms and feel about them. And the one thing I don't like about the genderbread person graph is that all of these identities are being listed on a line, but that line isn't even, that line is supposed to represent the spectrum, but unfortunately, there are people who don't fall along even a line. So next to gender-bed person, I have a three-dimensional graph because that way you can really plot the people who, for instance, don't feel that they have a gender identity or who don't feel that they dress according to any kind of gender expression or who were born without any kind of genitalia or who feel that they don't have a sexual orientation, who are asexual and or aromantic. The three-dimensional graph really allows all that complexity. And it's just important for you to understand that these things are very complex and that none of these things are aligned.
Okay, and that brings us to a break.
So do we have any questions before we take our break?
There were some questions about resources and handouts in the chat, and I do have a booklet that I'll be putting a link to later in the presentation, and then Arian, along with the Safe Space sticker, allies also get the trifold document. Do you want to describe that a little bit?
Yeah, so we do have a little trifold document that we will be giving out to all of you after this presentation, and you don't have to sign the ally agreement to receive that pamphlet. That pamphlet is for everyone who's attended this session, and it's just something you can look over. It gives you a lot of overview of what we've went over. It gives you a lot of tips, just kind of reminds you of a lot of these things that we have gone over and that we will go over later on in this presentation. So you kind of have that little reminder for you, and then it also has some resources at the end that let you know about a lot of resources within your area for LGBTQ people, low cost and free resources.
Yeah, and I've got the booklet that I'll give out I'll have a link to it, so it's electronic. It kind of summarizes what the goals are of this training, and it includes some reading resources that you can look to. There's a lot of that information is going to be in there as well. So even before you receive hard copies of things, you'll have stuff to take away today. Looks like has a question.
Yeah, a quick question about the survey. Is this something that is appropriate or recommended to survey our students for their gender?
Oh, no, I don't think that's what she meant. She was just saying if it's in a survey for something else and you're asking for sex in the survey to identify, for a survey for another topic that includes gender in the survey. But no, generally I would say no. Yeah. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah. I don't know. So did you want to clarify what you were thinking?
No, I mean, I just feel like we take surveys all the time and we do it in education. No, I don't do it in my class. I don't ask, but if you go to our educational data, it will tell you gender, ethnicity, or sometimes it's sex, race. And I honestly have a hard time with intertwining those two, like they're not the same, but then we use the same words for them. And, so anyway, I was just wondering, what was the actual appropriate way to ask for gender, because I've seen it done quite a few ways, and I like the box because then they can self-identify like Ari said.
Yeah. Great. Any other questions? Okay, let's take a break. Let's come back at 8:55.
Every day struggle and think you might get attacked or something might happen to you just for being who you are.
Especially when I'm nervous and worried about professors misgendering me or using my legal name in the classroom.
And it kind of brought me to a place where I didn't want to speak up and I didn't want to be open anymore.
It's a big box to unpack.
I identify as gender fluid.
queer or pansexual.
Queer trans man who is also Christian identified and white.
I identify as a dom or masculine of centered.
A trans male.
Pronouns are she, her, or kid, at which I made that up with 2 Ds.
I've chosen masculine for the time being. I'm trying it out.
Poly, pansexual, transsexual,
Gender fluid.
I prefer they, them, their pronouns.
I use he, him, his pronouns.
I am gender fluid.
I identify as a queer, genderqueer, or non-binary trans person.
Her, her, and hers. They, them, and theirs.
I'm genderqueer, pansexual.
It's pansexual, and I'm also a trans man.
A lesbian.
A gay man.
And I am a non-binary trans woman of color.
FTM, so I do identify as male, but I am transgender. And then I am also asexual, probably aromantic on that scale. Preferred gender pronouns are a big thing.
We are constantly worrying about being outed in classrooms, in counselors' offices.
Our school isn't set up so that we have preferred names or preferred pronouns on a roster that a professor gets.
So what do you prefer to be called, or what if you're masculine centered presenting, do you identify as trans or lesbian? Do you have a preferred gender pronoun?
Getting your legal name changed is really hard or expensive to do, and it's really out of my budget. If someone who's trans doesn't email the professor beforehand and say, hey, I know this is what it says on your roster, but actually I prefer this. And so you're essentially coming out every semester.
Before I had my legal name change was that before all the classes I would end up emailing my professors and being like, can you call me this name? Can you use these pronouns?
And if you don't email them beforehand, you have a really awkward situation on your hands when they call roll.
Every day it's scary to just be in class not knowing what people are going to say.
When my professors don't notice that I have a preferred name listed in the university registry, it can be very anxiety inducing to wonder, oh, what's going to happen on that first day of class when I'm outed? What are other students going to say? What is the teacher going to say?
People need to know that if they sign up for certain gym classes, that they will be able to go into the space. It's best for them, and they need a system to where people can get preferred names on their ID cards and being able to go into a classroom the first day knowing that your birth name will not be spoken.
My school does not have a preferred name policy, so a lot of times I feel uncomfortable talking to teachers or other students, or even submitting assignments because it's not the name that I identify with.
And some of them respected that and some of them didn't. And the ones who didn't, I immediately just totally checked out of their classes and just sort of did the bare minimum to pass.
There have been classes that I've skipped intentionally because I don't feel safe going.
There have been times where I've offered, I guess, a sort of different perspective on, normal gender role ideas and, that kind of thing, and it was kind of met with big backlash.
Advisors sort of tried to make a safe space, but at the same time, I don't feel comfortable and supported to be myself in those situations. So sometimes when we're dealing with sensitive issues, I have kind of trouble.
A teacher misgendering me, like, oh, good morning, sir. Or, students passing me, what's up, man? Things of that nature. Before I came out as gender fluid, completely misgendered. But when I encompassed the gender fluid, it made it easier for me.
So I felt like I kind of like recoiled, and I couldn't thrive, or I couldn't be as successful in that environment as I wanted to be.
There are instances where I feel unsafe, mostly because they're unmonitored or it's just not very populated. And I feel that there is an easy chance for me to be targeted as a trans person.
if it's just a simple thing about using the women's bathroom.
One of our students is a trans female, and she actually was escorted out of one of our bathrooms by a security guard.
As soon as I walk in there, I get stares, and it's hard for me to stare off those stares and, you know, counteract anything that they say or that they do.
So constantly at school, I am forced to think about the necessities of my own well-being versus thinking about my classroom and what I should be studying.
Anybody on the scale of fluidity with their gender, they need to be able to go into the bathroom that they're most comfortable with, and no one should be able to be harassed or removed by security.
I've lived in all women's dorms, and being the only guy in a women's dorm is kind of awkward.
I'm fortunate enough to be able to switch it on and off in a way that I can dress the way I want in safe places and then dress how I need to when I can.
When I am trying to concentrate in class, but I'm trying to also map out how I can get to the restroom while being safe.
There should be family bathrooms for anyone to be able to use the bathroom. We're just going to the bathroom, you know?
There's a lot that needs to go into my campus. A lot of more acceptance.
Housing has not made much progress. I've created an entire proposal.
Always feel uncomfortable in spaces where people start mentioning how they date and they have sex, not because they're being, you know, prejudiced against me, but because it's something I don't understand.
The person that I was communicating with no longer works there, and they haven't filled the position, and they told me just to basically wait until they could fill the position.
I wish HBCUs were more open to supporting or having resources for LGBTQ folk.
Being in the Bible Belt is something that honestly affects me because I am a religious person, but I also support gay rights 100%.
During gender studies, they try to get some of us, me included, that are in part of the LGBTQIA community to sometimes even speak out and try to teach the other students. I feel that this is wrong. Why should we ask students to tell their personal experiences?
It's just ignorance, it's just a lack of information flowing because they don't have a resource center.
You know, once people leave, you know, it's like as if we were never there. You know, once the advisors leave that actually direct our community, it dies out. Like nobody's there to pick it up and say, okay, let me just keep on going with this.
One where dialogue is encouraged for sure.
I love enthusiastic professors.
Whenever I'm at a place and I feel safe, I feel at home, I feel like I have no care in the world and I'm only there just for my education. And that's what the whole purpose of going to college is for, right?
Hands-on environment. 100% hands-on. It doesn't really matter who I'm with.
I love something that you have to really investigate and think about.
I love analytical and critical thinking, so once we can open up the floor, we can talk about it, everybody's free to discuss, and we bounce ideas off of each other. That's a great learning environment.
He makes me feel really comfortable about who I am as a person and what I identify as.
I definitely look forward to classes that are inclusive right off the bat. So if a professor goes out of their way to make sure to establish a safe space, to establish an inclusive space, I definitely will look forward to coming back every day and learning what I have to learn in that class.
A safe environment. I know that's cheesy as it sounds, but it's honestly a safe environment is somewhere that I feel excited to learn because I feel like I can actually put my full effort into learning.
An environment where everybody's just kind and loving and accepting.
I mean, when you're just open and you're like, yeah, we got this on the board and we're doing this today, like that brings me out. That makes me feel safe to be who I am.
One particular moment, he was like, well, you have to wear a dress for speech day. I don't wear dresses, so we had to compromise and meet in the medium, and I got to wear a bow tie and slacks. And that's where I kind of got my big urge to speak out more vocally versus standing in the background.
Let people be who they are. Let people express how they want to express themselves. And most importantly, do not judge a book by its cover.
I live on campus. I'm actually living in the new gender inclusive learning community at Purdue. It's very small right now, but we're hoping to make it bigger. But I'm really excited about it. It's going to be pretty awesome. An environment where I feel supported and where I feel like I can grow and be nurtured and be validated in all aspects of my identity. Allowing us to tell you who we are makes us feel safe as students. It makes us feel like we can learn in your classroom. It makes us feel like we can come to class.
Have a peek inside of the way the world works for us and let them know that we are a part and, you know, we're not separate, we're here.
My name is Matt.
English.
Sean.
Kate. Corinne.
Ms. Alicia. Morgan.
Eric.
Nate.
Marta.
Quentin.
Charlize.
Eddie.
Pat.
Ask me.
Ask me.
Ask me.
Or ask me.
All right, so we have a lot of questions in the chat. And before I start going through all of those, do we have any questions about the video? Someone asked, you know what year the video was made? It is a few years old, but it is still very current though. Any other questions about the video or anything that you saw in the video? Thank you, David. Yeah, so about 2015 to 2016 is when the video was produced. Okay, so if there are no other questions about the video, I will start going through the questions. So one of the first questions that came up during the video was someone asked about preferred names on our rosters. So at the moment, we do not have preferred names listed on the rosters. The name change task force that actually Liz and I are both on we are working to change that. We are still working with solutions, but we will be working on how preferred/chosen names are changed in the system because a lot of students kind of figure themselves out during college. So the name that they came into college with through their CCC Apply application may not be the same name that they identify with 6 months later, right? So we're working on coming up with a process where students can change their names, but we've also had a lot of cisgender students who have abused that system in the past and changed their names to things that were very inappropriate to be said out loud by anyone, anywhere. So unfortunately, the college took away that ability, which negatively impacted, of course, our trans students and our international students who wanted to be called by a different name than what appears on the roster. So we're working on coming up with a solution that works for everybody and allows for some oversight. So if you are interested in being on that task force, do please let me know because that is something that we are all working on because it is an issue that has affected our campus for a very long time. And at the moment, what we have going on right now is students can change their name by filling out a form on our website, and that form is submitted automatically to an administrator who goes in and manually makes the change into Canvas, but it only shows up in Canvas. It does not show up on the roster. It does not show up in Colleague or any other systems. So we're also trying to make all those systems communicate, figure out how to make that work. We're also in the process of changing some of the software that we are using. We're shifting away from things like Web Advisor to something else whose name is eluding me, but so we are in the process of other changes, which is kind of making it hard for us to figure out how to change things when things are already in the process of changing for different reasons. So that is something that is going on. So yeah, so students can't change their name in Canvas. They can also reach out to you. It might also be a good idea, as part of your introduction to your class to say, if you have a preferred name, please let me know before class starts. Or what a lot of people do is, for instance, if you're doing in-person classes, a lot of instructors will go around and ask for students to introduce themselves. So rather than calling names, they let the students say their name. So you would say, let's all introduce our preferred names and correct pronouns. And so then you would go around and have all the students let you know what are their preferred names that they prefer to go by. We also refer to that as chosen names. And what are their correct pronouns. That way you know how to refer to them. Someone asked, would it really be that difficult to enter this information into WebAdvisor during the registration process so it appears on our rosters? Unfortunately, when students register, they might go by one name, but they might start going by a different name later on as they figure out their gender identity while they're going to campus or going to school. So, so yeah, I think I kind of already answered that one. I think CCC Apply needs to step up with this part. Absolutely, we've been asking CCC Apply to change their gender options and a lot of those kind of demographic options and name options that they allow for in the application, because yeah, it's really not inclusive and they know that. And unfortunately, there hasn't been any change really. See, the next question is,
I think you got it.
yeah, and then someone wanted to mention that the lesbian flag on our slide was upside down, which could be true. So we'll definitely have to go back and check, because sometimes I do flip flags upside down. I'm a little bit dyslexic and things kind of look the same to me when it comes to those flags. And the flag in the background was also flipped upside down for a while until I realized the rainbow flag, the red belongs on top. So thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, and someone mentioned, true, oftentimes students are only 17 years old when they apply for college. And yeah, so by the time they come to our campus, they might already have a different name before they even start their first class. Or they might figure it out as they're attending school. I didn't even know that trans was a thing until I was like 25 and working here on campus and attending Jerry Thurston's Safe Space training 6 years ago or 5 years ago, something like that. So, a lot of them, they're still figuring themselves out. So their name might change multiple times. And so might their pronouns as they kind of figure out, what feels most right to them. Do you have any other questions?
Okay, well, let's keep going then. I hope that by now it's starting to become a lot more clear that sex, gender, orientation all exist along spectrums and don't fall into two binary categories. And this can be challenging for us because we really do live in a very heteronormative, cisnormative society. And I'm going to talk more about that in a second. And by doing this, what happens is we exclude or ignore this whole middle part of the spectrum. And so we want to avoid doing that. And so when we're thinking about heteronormativity, cisnormativity, these are really normative assumptions. And the way that I like to talk about this is in reference to the game of life. I don't know if you can give a thumbs up or whatever. If you have played the game of life, you're familiar with it. I think most of us are. And in this game, it's a really good example of those heteronormative, cisnormative assumptions that we make every single day without even thinking about it or realizing that we're making these types of assumptions. So in the game, there's pink pegs and blue pegs, right? And so right away we have a gender binary assumption that we're making. And most people will call a pink peg a girl and a blue peg a boy, which is a cisnormative assumption. And throughout the game, you move throughout your life events, and if you get to a marriage square, you have to get married. It's mandatory. You have to stop and get married, and that's a heteronormative assumption. And then when you land on having a baby girl, most people will pick a pink peg, and land on a baby boy, you'll pick a blue peg. So, there's just a lot of assumptions that we go through that really illustrates how pervasive these assumptions are in our society. And we kind of assume that heterosexual, cisgender, these are just the human default. We make that assumption. And generally, nobody means any harm by this. And that's when it's important to recognize that there's a difference between our intent. So I didn't mean to offend you or hurt your feelings, and the actual impact it has. And by making these assumptions, it can create and does create what we refer to sometimes as a chilly climate, or an uncomfortable or even sometimes hostile environment for members of the LGBTQ community. And so even if our intent wasn't there, we need to understand the impact and take responsibility for that.
So another term that we may not be familiar with is the term erasure. And besides being a rock band, erasure is also a term for when you ignore the existence of genders and sexualities that exist in the middle of the spectrum. So for instance, when you teach history, but you don't teach, the trans or non-binary heroes of our country, or, when you're teaching English and you don't mention that like Walt Whitman was gay, etc. You're kind of erasing LGBTQ identities from these historical contexts. You're making it seem like LGBTQ people haven't been around from the start of time, which we have been. LGBTQ people have been in existence as long as humans have been in existence, as far back as we can discern. It is hard to be certain of that because it's history was, we refer to things differently throughout each different century of our existence, but we have always been here, but unfortunately we haven't always been mentioned. We've always been the minority. So it is very easy to accidentally erase us from your thoughts, from your curriculum, from your assumptions, and that shouldn't be the case. And so erasure is a term that we use to refer to that erasing of us from these contexts. Another term that you may not be familiar with, but is important to know, is heterosexism. This is usually more of a conscious belief, whereas the other terms we went over earlier tend to be things that people do accidentally just because of how we've been raised, because we've all just kind of marinated in a society that believes that being not LGBTQ is supposed to be normal, and that's the correct way to be, and things like that. And unfortunately, that just isn't true. But the heterosexism is more of a conscious belief that everyone is and should be heterosexual, and that heterosexuality is superior to other sexualities. So we see examples of this in a lot of the violence that is committed against the LGBTQ community. So for instance, Matthew Shepard is someone who was killed by people who were heterosexist. They pretended that they were okay with him being gay because he was an out gay college student, and some other students pretended that they were okay with it. They invited him to hang out with them, and when he did, they unfortunately beat him up and tied him to a fence and left him out in a field overnight on a winter night, and he ended up dying a few days later from the extent of his injuries and exposure. And afterward, a lot of people would refer to this as Matthew Shepard was killed because he was gay. If you Google Matthew Shepard, everything that comes up is going to say Matthew Shepard killed because he was gay. Matthew Shepard killed because he was gay. But we really should think about our language, because how we position our language positions people to see things differently. So for instance, when we say killed because he was gay, we're kind of placing the blame on him. We're saying, it was because of something that he was, or because of something he did. It was because of him that he died. When really he was killed because his murderers were sexual supremacists. His murderers believed that heterosexuality was superior to other sexualities, and that he therefore needed to be killed because he was not heterosexual. So when we rephrase our language to this, we are placing the blame on his murderers and not blaming him because he did nothing, but they obviously did something. So, you know, that's just something to consider. You know, language really is important. You know, when I try to teach people things like this in real life, you know, when I try to teach like my partner or my friends, you know, hey, don't say it that way, say it this way. And they're like, oh my God, what's the difference? Like, get over yourself, stop being so sensitive. But the whole reason why I'm trying to correct people, you know, and the reason why this is so important, why our language is important, is because it positions people to believe. You know, it can, how we phrase things can make people believe that something is correct or not correct, that something, that someone should be murdered versus being, you know, perfectly natural. You know, it really makes a huge difference. And it really trains people to have a different mindset. You know, if you teach people, you know, that normal is supposed to mean not being LGBTQ, then it makes the rest of us seem like we are abnormal. When actually we are normal, we just exist as a minority. So I hope that makes sense. If you have any questions, please feel free to speak up. So my next term is transphobia. And this is also another term that some of you may or may not be familiar with, but, and here's a lot of words, but basically it's just a reaction of fear, loathing, it's discrimination, etc., against people who are or who appear to be trans. So this not only affects people that are trans, this also affects people who just look like they might be trans. I know of women who are very masculine presenting. They wear clothes that look like men's clothes. You know, they're just kind of, they just naturally are more masculine. That's how they present themselves, but they don't identify as trans. And yet they are so targeted by people who like to target trans people. Transphobia can be both unconscious or conscious, meaning that some people know that they don't like trans people. They're usually very adamant about it. They will say outright, etc., that they don't like trans people. And then it can also be unconscious, where we're trained to think that being cisgender is normal, and therefore trans people are all just weirdos or freaks or whatever. But we don't really, we wouldn't say that out loud. You know, we know that that's bad. You know, our brain and mouth filter usually prevents us from, you know, kind of saying that out loud, but we kind of feel that way because that's how we were raised. That's what we were trained to believe. And that's what society often trains us to believe. You know, if we look at the media, trans people historically have always been made fun of. We've always been like the butt end of the joke. We've always been misgendered, dead named. You know, historically, we've been trained in so many different ways to think a certain way. And so a lot of these things can also be unconscious as well as conscious, or one or the other. Next slide.
Thanks, Arian. Okay, so now we want to talk a little bit about privilege. Privileges are unearned advantages that we have that are gained by our birth, our social position, effort. We can gain privileges through effort or concession. So what a privilege is, some special right or advantage or authority or immunity possessed by a person or a group. And there are a lot of examples of hetero and cis privileges, including having love, acceptance, and support from your parents, being allowed to use the restroom of your identified gender, adopting young children, having role models, specifically in STEM. You know, there are a lot of things that we don't even, we totally take for granted. We don't even recognize those things as privileges. And then there's more listed on the screen here. And this is not something that we want to shame people for or feel bad about, but it is helpful and important to be aware of the privileges that you have, because when it comes down to it, your privilege is not going to define your character, but what will define your character is your actions. And so if we understand our privilege, it makes it easier for us to use that privilege to support others who are less privileged. Because privilege is power, and it gives us the power to interrupt bias, to disrupt discrimination and to ultimately fight oppression, which is what we're here for. So we want to, as instructors, use our privilege and our power as instructors to create an inclusive environment where students are free to be themselves, so that they are free to think and learn, which is the whole point of them being there, not to defend who they are. So we want to understand our privilege and use it to become an advocate. And that's now we're kind of finally getting to why we're here. We want to become allies. What can we do? How do we do it? So an ally is someone who is willing to confront bias, whether it's implicit or explicit. We here see heterosexism, homophobia, transphobia, biphobia, and to recognize those biases within ourselves. Because like Ariane was explaining, we've all been, I like that way of describing it, kind of marinating in this society where it's impossible to not absorb some of that. So you have to recognize it when you have a thought, and that, oh, well, maybe that's not normal, or maybe that's not abnormal, so we can start to see that first in ourselves, and then we can correct it first in ourselves, and then within our classrooms, within our social circles. And as an ally, there are really 4 stages of being an ally, and it is great to be at any stage. We're going to start with self-awareness. So you want to think about how are your experiences different from those of the LGBTQ community? How do you experience privilege? What heteronormative and cisnormative assumptions are you making, or are present, in your curriculum, in your day? Where are you seeing them in commercials? Are you, just to start to notice and become aware of them. Are there double standards in your classroom? So start to develop some consciousness around this, including, like we've been saying through the whole presentation, language really is important. So be conscious of the language you use, the behavior that you exhibit, and ultimately the thoughts that you're having. And then education, we need to move into self-education. Like we saw in the video, it's not okay for us to just ask our one LGBTQ friend to explain everything to us. We all are, educated, we understand how to do research, and we need to use those skills to learn about this as well. So what are the issues that LGBTQ individuals are experiencing? What kinds of bias and discrimination are occurring on individual, institutional, and different society levels? What are the policies, like we're learning right now about preferred or chosen name on the roster? What are the policies at our school, and how do these policies, or gender neutral restrooms, what are the issues on our school, and how are they affecting people? And then we can move into creating open and supporting environment through developing different skills. So we want to communicate our awareness and knowledge to others. We want to be proactive in creating that inclusive environment, and using the information that we've learned to model inclusive behavior. And we can be visible. So you can display your I'm an ally sticker on your office door. You can attend LGBTQ ally events in Fresno, celebrate difference, let people know you're an ally. And so this will start to help create and build on the support structure that we have on campus, and will help stop those expressions of bias, at least in your presence, which will slow down the contagiousness of them. You need to be prepared to interrupt bias. So when it happens, you have to respond to it, because by not responding, more often that can be mistaken as accepting that. And be willing to listen. We're going to make mistakes, and so make a mistake, listen, acknowledge that you made a mistake, apologize, and just listen to these experiences and keep learning. And then the 4th stage is action, by bringing other allies into the network, bringing a friend to an LGBTQ event, and advocate for change where you have influence. So like I said, we can be anywhere, you know, on these stages of being an ally, and it's wonderful. But our goal is to, you know, to move up to the fourth stage. And I think I'm gonna let Arian take on this next slide. Some more examples.
So what can an ally specifically do? The number one thing that you as an ally can do for us is you can avoid making assumptions. Because first off, you can't tell a person's sexual orientation, biological sex, gender identity, correct pronouns, or any of those things from our appearance. A lot of people think that you can just see someone who looks female and that you can just call that person by she, her pronouns. You can call that person ma'am, things like that. And a lot of times that may be correct, but there are also times where that isn't correct. And you're actually insulting that person, and they're trying not to let you see how hurt they are by what you just referred to them as. So you really can't tell these things from anyone's appearance, and you especially can't tell them from someone who is LGBTQ, and you often can't tell that a person is LGBTQ. And just because a person comes out to you as LGBTQ, lets you know that they are gay, for instance, that does not mean that they are attracted to you, okay? Because people who are gay, it's just like people who are heterosexual. You know, just because you are a woman who is attracted to men doesn't mean you're attracted to all men. And it's the same thing for us. You know, just because a man is attracted to men doesn't mean he's attracted to all men. Also, please try to use inclusive language that does not assume heterosexuality or cisgender identity. So what I mean by that is please use language that uses they, them instead of he/she, instead of, you know, him or her. Instead of saying things like that, say they, say them in those hypothetical scenarios, because when you say he/she, you are ignoring all the people whose gender identities do not align with binary pronouns. But when you use a gender inclusive term like they, them, that term can encompass any kind of gender or even those without gender. So when you use that term to postulate hypothetical scenarios, for instance, in your examples that you give in class, you're including the fact that trans people could exist in those scenarios. Otherwise, you're basically erasing us from existence and, you know, and assuming that we don't exist, and therefore we couldn't possibly be a part of this hypothetical scenario. So just try to use language like that, and also try to, you know, if you need to ask someone like, you know, hey, do you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend? Ask instead, do you have a partner? And be prepared for the fact that the person might be asexual and might, just because they don't have a partner doesn't mean they want one or that they're searching for one. You know, just because a lot of people get married doesn't mean everyone wants to get married. So really try to not make any assumptions, really try not to make assumptions about gender, about heterosexuality, even about, you know, their ability to experience romance. And also respect our confidentiality. So just because someone came out to you and told you that they are trans or that they are gay or etc., does not mean that they are ready to come out to everyone. They might just be trusting that information to you because you establish your classroom as a safe space, and so they recognize you as someone who is safe to be themselves with, but they might not feel safe to be themselves with their own family, with their own partner, with you know, other people, you know, at work, etc. So that it might just be here that they feel safe. So don't assume how out they are. And always ask before you out them to someone else, is it okay if I tell this person for this purpose that you are trans? You know, always please ask us beforehand if you need to out us to someone before you do so, because they might not be as out as you think they are. Someone has a question. I was told by a peer that we should avoid the term guys, like, hey, hi guys. I've used that as a general term, but I was told that that was no longer a generalized term and I should avoid it. Is this true? Yes, because the term guys assumes that everyone is male. So because that term is supposed to only refer to guys, to men. So when you say hi guys, and you're basically ignoring all of the women in your presence. Yeah, I've seen people use the term guys to a group that was solely comprised of women. And you know, so which is very inappropriate, obviously. So I mean, yeah, we we tend to try to use that term as though it's like a gender neutral term, but that term actually isn't. Its definition in the dictionary is for male people. But unfortunately, yeah, a lot of people from all generations have been using that to just refer to everybody. But it really, not only does it ignore the existence of non-binary people, but also ignores even the existence of females. An ally should also speak out against anti-LGBTQ comments, even if they came from an LGBTQ person. So even if someone is LGBTQ says something bad about trans people or about gay people or about bisexual people, etc., you as an ally, even though you are not LGBTQ, and therefore it might feel kind of weird having to stick up for the LGBTQ community against someone who is a part of that community, you should still do so. Sometimes we oppress ourselves. Sometimes we have our own biases, even against people within our own community. The LGBTQIA community is a very complex and diverse community, and not all of us understand and respect all those differences that we have. I'm seeing a lot of comments in the chat. Some people said, how about hey scholars, or good morning fellow rock stars? I like that, gender neutral. Someone else said peeps. Someone else said hey everyone. Someone else said y'all. Those are all great terms. They're all gender neutral. When I need to refer to someone, if I need to catch someone's attention, because sir and ma'am or sir and madam assume gender, I prefer to say like, hey friend, or hi, excuse me. Sometimes if you just say like, excuse me, usually everyone will turn and look at you. And so usually you gain the attention of the person that you're looking for. Someone said, I say good morning, smart people. Some people said, hola friends. Love them. Great examples. Thank you. So anyway, an ally is also an active ally. So what I mean by that is they are actively present. They make themselves heard and seen and known as an ally. They introduce their pronouns with their name. They attend LGBTQ programs and events like this one. So you're all off to a great start. An active ally also displays their support using like rainbow bracelets, rainbow flags, etc., and isn't worried that people will assume that they are gay because they know that being gay is not a bad thing, that those people's assumptions, the fact that they're making assumptions is the only bad thing happening. And if you goof, just apologize. You're not expected to know everything. Anyone who expects you to know everything is, again, making an assumption that they shouldn't. You are human beings. Most people should and do understand that. And, so if you just apologize and, in a respectful way, and, it'll be okay. Next slide. Someone said, I try to use the term everyone, but I must admit that I will still use guys at times because it is programmed in me for many years, just like I still say dude unconsciously. I have the same issue, and I am trans, and so it even affects my language. I grew up saying guys all the time, so I have the same issue, and I totally get it. It's really difficult to retrain that, and it is important that we do so, even though still to this day I slip up now and then. So let's go over tips for being a trans ally. So first off, avoid assumptions about whether the person is trans and what their sexual orientation is. So just because you see someone and you can't tell if they're male or female, they might not be trans. They might just happen to be someone who was born who looks kind of both male and female, who looks masculine for a woman or feminine for a man. Or that might be an intersex person, meaning that they were born with chromosomes and or genitalia that is neither very male or female looking. It's kind of somewhere in between. Or they weren't born with them. Some people are missing a chromosome. Instead of having, XX or XY, they have XO. Or sometimes they have an extra chromosome. Sometimes they have a hormone insensitivity syndrome, like androgen insensitivity, etc. There's so many different ways that people can be born and raised, so many different biological combinations that can occur. So it's really important that we don't make any assumptions based on people's appearance. And when you know that someone is trans, it's really important to not make any assumptions about what their sexual orientation might be, because for instance, it would be very heteronormative to see someone who presents as male and assume that they are going to be attracted to women, right? Because you're assuming that being a man means being attracted to women, which obviously, as we've learned through this presentation, is not the case in many of the times. And I see that the chat is blowing up. A lot of talk about the term guys. Someone said, I think that erasure has led to the misplaced sense that more people are becoming or turning LGBTQ. Instead, these non-binary identities probably have been present all through history. The coincidence of erasure in our society becoming more accepting has exacerbated this misconception. If we include more historical LGBTQ figures in our teaching, then this would combat this misconception. That was very well said and very true. So thank you. Thank you very much for that comment. And just because I'm sorry, where did I leave off at? Oh, please use the name and the pronouns and the term that that person self-identifies with. So if that person identifies to you, identifies themselves to you as a non-binary transgender woman, call them that. You know, don't call them, you know, trans woman or non-binary person. Call them non-binary trans woman, if that's what they told you they are. You know, if they tell you that their name is Jessica, don't call them Jess. Don't call them by whatever their name used to be. Call them Jessica. If they tell you that their pronouns are they, them, or that their pronouns are she, her, etc., use those pronouns. Don't try to use other pronouns. When I tell people that my pronouns are he, him, and then they use terms like they, them, I feel like they're ignoring my true gender, that they are trying to kind of cop out and go around and not recognize my true gender. You know, and please don't use pointing as a pronoun unless that person asks you to do so. People do that to me a lot. It's so weird. And it's kind of awkward and it makes me feel awkward. So please don't do that unless that is how that person identifies. If they ask you to point to them instead of saying their name because they don't have pronouns, or to use their name as a pronoun because they don't have pronouns, then please do so, but only if they actually ask you to. And if you don't know a person's pronouns, you can ask them privately, especially if you're just singling that one person out. You don't want to accidentally out them to other people because they might not be out to their other classmates, for instance. So if you just want to ask that one person their pronouns, make sure you do it after class, you know, pull them aside. But in general, the best practice is to just ask everyone's pronouns with their names, and to just introduce your pronouns with your name every time you introduce your name. That really normalizes the fact that no one should be assuming other people's gender. A trans person's real name is the name that they tell you. Okay, so when we tell you, for instance, my name is Arian, don't ask me what my name used to be. It's very offensive in the trans community. I actually don't mind too much. My previous name was a beautiful name, so I don't have much feelings against it. But a lot of other people, that name that was assigned to them at birth, it represents a gender that does not match their true gender. And so it's very uncomfortable to have to acknowledge the fact that that they belong to this minority community. And it's a very sensitive information to have to impart on someone. And so you really shouldn't be asking that kind of information unless you actually need it. You know, if you are filling out a legal document for them and you actually need their legal name, let them know, hey, I need to know your legal name. You know, is that different from the name that you gave me, etc. You know, ask them to write it down or something, you know, so they're not saying it out loud and being overheard by other people around them. It's just something to think about. Just because a person is transgender does not mean that we have had or that we even want any kind of hormones or surgeries. And in general, there's not just one surgery, okay? So don't ask us, have you had the surgery? There's so many different surgeries, and each type of surgery has so many varieties to it, so many different names that could go by, and it's really nothing that you need to know unless you are our doctor and you are seeing us for a medical malady. Please do not ask those things. You don't need to know those things about us. And by law, a person who is transgender can use the restroom that they identify with in college. I don't know if it's necessarily true for outside of the school environment, but thanks to Title IX, it is protected within the school environment. Do I have any questions before we move on? All right,
Okay.
Liz, I think you're good to go.
Yeah, let's look at some practical steps we can take to address bias and LGBTQ phobia. So, I mean, the first thing is really critical. You should always assume that there is an LGBTQ person or someone who cares about an LGBTQ person in the room. And if you remember all the way back, click through all these, to the very beginning of this presentation where Ariane presented some statistics, and 20 to 25% of the population, especially of younger people, openly identifies as LGBTQ. So the chance that there is not an LGBTQ person in the room in every one of your classes is very slim. So just always assume that there is. And it's very helpful and important to, like we said before, speak up against offensive comments, even if it comes from an LGBTQ person. You don't want to affirm that that's okay by not saying anything. And in doing it, you can personalize your response. You know, I feel uncomfortable when people say things like that. It upsets me because it perpetuates stereotypes. So you want to make it less about shaming and blaming and more about how you personally feel about discrimination against the LGBTQ community. We want to challenge the behavior and not the person. And you need to practice, you know, so we can practice at home. It's scary at first, but it is really important in speaking up. And it gets easier with practice, just like everything else. And we don't want to make, you know, like it says, a big dramatic fight about it, but we do want to help people to realize that what they're doing, again, there's a difference between intent and impact, and that while they didn't mean anything by it, they were just trying to be funny. It's actually offensive, and it creates an environment that's not conducive to why we're here. It's not inclusive. It's not helpful for the learning environment. It's not what we want in our classrooms or on our campus, or anywhere else, really. And we do have some specific classroom strategies. So one of the things that I like to do is the very first day of class, and this of course was different, you know, last year when we were all online, but in person, when I call roll for the first time, I call last names only. And so people have to really pay attention because they have to listen for their last names, and then they can give you their, you know, what is your first name? And then they can tell you, so then you don't risk outing anybody in the classroom. And of course, we want to display our pride with our safe space stickers. You can include an inclusion statement in your syllabus, and we have examples of that in the booklet, which I'm going to drop a link to in the chat for everybody. And know where to seek resources on campus and in the area, and know how to provide them as needed. We do have an LGBTQ resources page on our Fresno City website that you can refer people to for some resources, and it references other local resources and hotline numbers and organizations. And a lot of that will be in the trifold pamphlet that we have a hard copy of that we'll get to you later. Yeah, and like I said, there's example syllabus statements in this pamphlet that this booklet that I just put in the chat link. So yeah, so we are about to enter another break, and then we're going to come back and do some activities. So does anybody have any questions for us before we jump into our next? Yeah, there's our link to our page. Yeah, so I know it's been a lot of information, but hopefully it's summarized fairly well in that booklet, and you have access to the slides, and then we're going to practice using some of what you've learned in the next part of this. I don't see any questions.
I don't see any either.
Okay, then let's come back at 10 o'clock. Okay, it's 10. So we're going to do some activities now. I'm going to split everybody into breakout rooms, and you'll have access to this this scenario. There's a link in the chat that'll pull up a Google slide. So we have some scenarios we'd like you to look at, and these, I believe, Arian can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think come from actual occurrences on our Fresno City College campus. So we'd just like you to get together in your breakout room and discuss. And then, yes, let us know if you need an interpreter in your breakout room, and we'll make sure that that happens. So interpreters, you'll be automatically assigned to a breakout room, but don't go there because that happened automatically. It wasn't intentional. Yeah, and so then you can add a slide and just put your comments in there as a group, and we'll come back in, I don't know, 10 or so minutes. We'll kind of monitor and see how the slides are progressing, and then we'll discuss as a big group. And we have a few of these, so let's start with the first one. I'm going to open the breakout rooms. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I saw that you got some responses posted. Not everybody was able to. Does anybody want to start sharing? I can share the screen if we want, or you all have access to it as well.
I'll go, Liz.
That'd be great.
Yep. So our conversation revolved around a lot, express empathy and acknowledgement of the person's pain. And then like we started talking about psych services, financial aid, getting them connected to resources. When I've dealt with students that have been victims of violence, so Sean Henderson and the Dean of Student Services office has a team of individuals who get together to help students when they are in situations like this. And basically that team is tasked with getting the student connected to various resources to get them, take care of their immediate safety, and then finance and the food, right? And they basically know what they're doing. So just as an awareness, like we kept talking about all of these things, don't get overwhelmed as a teacher thinking you've got to do everything, right? You contact Sean's office. I asked him, is there a better way he said, yeah, bring the student to the campus nurse. Like the campus nurse knows exactly how to triage the situation and start getting that student the care that they're going to need. And so I wouldn't, and maybe I'm wrong, but I wouldn't hesitate in a situation like this to tell that student, hey, can I walk with you over to, it sounds strange, but I want to walk you over to the nurse's office, because we can start getting you connected with a whole bunch of support services that way.
Can you tell us how to get a hold of Sean Henderson, and then
so
is the health and
you can
wellness
call his
office
and talk to his secretary, and or just email him. So like I've gone, so last semester I had a student who was being abused, and they told me about it, and I called Sean right away, and bam, like they were on it.
That's
right.
Great.
So by extension, if it's not like it's kind of hard to say, but if it's not a huge emergency, right, but that a student is struggling, then the starfish.
Oh yeah.
Right. Yeah. I don't use it because I tend to just walk my student over to psych services.
Yeah, I walk
them over to student services. Like that's what I do.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but Starfish does have a system for flagging a student that's at risk. And the people who are on this team, this organization that we have on campus, they monitor that, like the counselors monitor it and flag it and send it on to the different things you can know.
Can I ask a follow-up question about that?
Mm.
So let's hope that we're all open like soon, but like right now, psych services and nurse, it's by phone. And it used to be they're in our office asking us, we could call, we could hand the phone right over to the student. But how would you handle that? Would you have, so you just give them the number, I guess, and have them call while we're 100% on, or I'm 100% online?
I've done it to the point where, sorry, to your hand. I've done it where I'm like on, because this happened on Zoom. right? I'm on Zoom and like right now I want to call. We're going to stay on Zoom. We're going to call the phone, right? I've done that. I've done where they were like not in a safe spot where they couldn't do that. And I said, okay, get to a safe place and I'm going to follow up in 2 hours. Like, I want to see you in it really depended on the severity. Other students came to me and are just, breaking because of the pandemic or whatever. I'm like, look, okay, psych services is going to take like 4 days. Like, they're just that impacted. And so I'm going to check with you, at this date and time to see if you've established contact, that kind of thing, right? So it's the virtual walk with them over, right? Can't physically take them, but I can make sure that they are not overcome by the informal web page that they have to sign into to even just get screened in the first place.
Yeah, thank you. I saw that had her hand up and
thank you.
Question?
Yes, I did. I did want to say that as counselors, some of us are going to go back to the campus, and I have done the training, and in my cubicle, I do have the Ally sticker as well. But when students do come in, I believe you can also give a list. Maybe we can generate a list of counselors that are part of Ally and whatnot, so that way any instructors that may want to forward a student or their contact or their information to any counselors, we definitely can connect them with the resources on campus and whatnot. We can also be, by far, we are nowhere close to psych services or anything like that, but just for that immediate contact or that immediate conversation or just anything, even if it's just a little bit of just sitting there, bringing them to the office and just having them talk, just having them air it out. Some of us counselors definitely would be willing and ready to help students in this manner.
And psych services does have people who specifically work with LGBTQ students. They also, I don't know if they have this still ongoing during the pandemic, but beforehand they did have the Rainbow Rand support group, which was a LGBTQ support group that was very well attended by our students. They said that those sessions were always full. But they do have people working there who are LGBTQ and who specifically do work with LGBTQ students. So they're definitely a great resource.
I saw Neha had a question and she had her hand up at one point.
Yeah, and I think there was a lot of information provided that answered most of the questions. I did use Sean last semester too, and they were quick in their response. It was great. I would say just, some of the websites that we have say specifically, have to be a full-time student or, so just, I don't know how welcoming. So it was a lot of phone calls from my end and helping the student feel welcome too, because we're all online. So just one observation on the message that is online there is not very friendly sometimes. But everyone answered my question, so thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's really good. Does anybody else want to share their breakout room feedback or responses? We have a couple of other scenarios we can look at, and we can do breakout rooms again, or we can talk more about this one. Does everyone move on to the next one?
Liz?
Yeah.
I put it in the chat, but I've referred students to Natalie Chavez when they've had housing needs. She is in charge of a program that can help pay for housing. And so she's a resource that I've used on a couple of occasions for students. Now, if a student has emergency housing, this resource isn't that quick, but in social sciences, we have the social work interns who have information, community information about emergency housing for students. So those are resources that I've used.
Okay, that's really helpful. Okay.
And Natalie Chavez is awesome. She replied immediately. I had a student who was in a very tough situation and she replied immediately.
Okay, wow, that's really great information. Thank you. Thanks, Nancy. Okay, so lots of great resources. We're adding these, and we may even use some of this to update the LGBTQ website, or just to make sure things are interconnected so that it's easy to navigate. Okay. For simplicity, I'm going to send us all back to the original or the same breakout rooms. And oh wait, here's the link. Sorry, there's the link in the chat. Okay, everybody's back. How did it go?
Good. Our group tends to like to just talk about it and then we never make a slide. So,
that's okay. That's okay. What'd you talk about, Jim?
Well, one aspect was to be inclusive with working on how to take role comfortably, letting them say their names. But one thing that I tend to like to do is let them talk to each other in smaller groups. I mean, someone who is in a class of 40 maybe doesn't want to say their name in front of all 40 people, but if you let them talk to one another in smaller groups and get more comfortable with people nearby. Peer pressure to me is way more important. Peer comfort is way more important than whether or not they're just comfortable with just me. I'm an old guy, that's sitting in front of the room or in front of the Zoom. I'm the one who's showing them math. I mean,
yeah,
it's a lot more important for them to feel comfortable talking to one another than it is for them just to talk to me. So if they end up talking to one another and feel comfortable with one another, I find that they end up not worrying too much about me.
Yeah,
and my group, did you guys add a few more things? Because we didn't make a slide.
That's okay.
We were just trying to be proactive. In the end, when we had 7 seconds counting down, I said, we didn't answer the question. But that's what we came up with, is that we're gonna address it initially. We're not gonna have this problem.
Yeah, exactly.
No students will ever laugh.
Yeah, no. No, that's good. I think that's important to address it. Respond to it.
Yeah,
Rodney.
I can share our group. We're group 4, so we're in our group. And the first thing we would do is affirm the student and extend a warm welcome to them. So after we're corrected with their name, welcome Birch. It's a pleasure to have you in this class. At the end of role, perhaps addressing the expectations of respect in the classroom and just reaffirming that we want the environment in this class to be warm and welcoming to all so that ideas can be explored and expressed. And then if the behavior of the problematic student continues, we could address that on an individualized basis. We think it was important not to put the student or situation on blast and draw extra attention to it. And so, yeah, that's what we came up with.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think referring back to the participant booklet, there's that sample diversity statement and safe zone statement that you could have in your syllabus, and kind of referring back to that, like these are the class expectations, and just reminding them of that could be helpful. So does another room want to tell us?
I'll go. I had a really good comment. Obviously, we started it with we would never not address this day one. We feel like day one, we all make a big point of acceptance, understanding. We're going to be talking about difficult things. At least in my class with statistics, we do analyze and interpret the things around us, which sometimes are uncomfortable. So I really lay a foundation of, sometimes we talk about things that make some people uncomfortable, but we have to be kind to each other, be okay making mistakes and learning. So we feel like this negativity obviously would never happen after we talk about it the first time. But if it did come up, kind of bring it on ourselves and say, ooh, that makes me feel a little uncomfortable. We don't, to laugh or joke about anyone's name. It's not really funny. And then if it happens again, pull them aside and say that's unacceptable. Remove them from the class. Really address it, one-on-one.
That's great. Great. Those are all really good examples. Other breakout rooms? I know there were lots of you.
I'll go ahead. So we were in group 3. And, pretty much a lot what other people had already said. However, I do have just a question. So some people would say to not say anything or recognize the disturbance in real time so as to avoid escalation. Whereas other people we've heard, would stop the process of roll and, say something, or, even say a comment like, that's what the person wants to be called, so let's respect that and move on, So I'm just curious, what do you think of those various options?
So we have kind of a tightrope that we have to walk in this scenario because we don't want to put too much focus on that student and make it about that student because it's kind of awkward being trans just because other people get awkward around us and we don't like having a lot of attention kind of put on us. We don't like being spotlighted in the classroom, etc. So you kind of have to adjust in a way that doesn't necessarily like put the focus on the student. And you might have things that you need to get to on your agenda. You don't have a time, you might not have the time to like really make a big teaching moment out of it. And if so, it even a little bit can go a long ways. At least saying, thanks, Birch, and then, at least saying some sort of comment that addresses the inappropriate behavior and, affirms that behavior is inappropriate and is not tolerated in the classroom. Something just like, I don't know, it's so funny, but this is a safe space and all identities are welcome. You are just saying at least, welcome, Birch, and just as a reminder to the class, we are going to be respectful of all people's identities and we will not bully anyone. If you have any questions or don't remember that, please refer to this part of your syllabus and that will, and then if you have any questions, please let me know. Something that at least, addresses that behavior and reinforces the fact that behavior is not okay. Did that answer your question?
I think so. So what you're saying is you shouldn't ignore it. You should make some comment.
Yes, do not ignore it because if you just let it go, then you're reinforcing the idea that behavior is okay.
Did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, there's a chance that the disturbance that did occur in the class was only seen by very few individuals. Maybe the instructor and a few individuals around were, observed what had happened. By putting it on blast immediately and drawing attention to it, now we've got the whole class involved in a scenario. We thought it would be best to save that correction until the end of roll and reaffirming the safe space and so on. So that's where we were coming from, Mark. Welcome the student, let them know that, give them a warm welcome, let them know that they're in a safe space, and then addressing the issue immediately after roll.
And I think I think that's a really good point because you as the instructor, like you have a feel for the sort of the energy in the classroom, right? And so you want to use your judgment. And so, if it doesn't feel right to address the whole class about it, and then don't, use your judgment. And if you can, or, maybe if you're walking through the classroom and you can be more subtle about it and address those students specifically and the ones who heard it, or, you know what I mean? You'll kind of know. So it is kind of a tightrope, but you do have to rely on your judgment as well as what's going to be the best to have, because you don't want to make it worse if you can avoid it. Dylan?
Irene, the data you had right at the beginning, there's like 3% of us old folks that said that they're part of that community, and now the Gen X and all of them, it's like 24-25%. I think as instructors we need to recognize the power that has in our classroom, And that's why I don't take roll out loud. And I make them talk to one another in smaller groups. When someone is accepted in that small group, if that something happens to them later, that group ends up backing them up. And you as an instructor don't have to be the one that has control over it. Now, it takes some time to get used to that in a classroom, to feel like you don't need to have control. But it turns out students feel more comfortable in your class, they study more together, and then more people pass because they're working together. We should be using that value that 18-year-olds, 24, 25% of them feel comfortable understanding more about what being presented to us than I do. And it's a powerful thing. So keep in mind, we don't have to be the ones in control of all of that. It's easier if they do it. It takes a while to get used to how to let them help each other out. But the more you do that, the more they're comfortable with the campus, your class, and more students pass. It has almost nothing to do with your subject either. If they're comfortable in your room, they're going to study. If they have friends in their room, they're going to study with them. And if they don't like math, that doesn't matter, because they have friends that are going to help them study.
Do you want to say something, please?
Yeah, real quick. So kind of a middle ground in these scenarios is, for instance, if you were taking roll via the last name, right? I liked your bit about that, by the way. If you're taking roll and you hear like a commotion from, say, the back corner, right? And some students chuckle, but you personally, the instructor, didn't hear what was said, right? After you called their name. What do you do in that case? What I would do is I would, look up towards them, make sure everything is whatever. And then I would continue to take roll. But then once roll was done, then I would make a point to say this is a safe and all inclusive and accepting classroom environment. So that's, I think, kind of doing both here. Is that an okay strategy?
Of course, yeah. I mean, I think something that you're comfortable with, and it does address the situation. So it's not ignoring it, which I think is what we're trying to say. You don't want to just ignore it and pretend like nothing happened. This is also really good, and it's 10:40 already. So we've really used up our time, and we have a guest speaker here that I would like to introduce, Elena, to talk to us about a special event on campus this fall. So we have 5 minutes left, so I'm going to just turn it right over to you, Elena.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Liz. Thanks for inviting me today. Good morning, everyone. My name's Eleanor Harvey-Collins. I am the curator for the Art Space Gallery. And yeah, I just want to take a couple of minutes to let everyone know about 2 exhibitions that are coming to Fresno this semester that highlight artists and activism in the LGBTQ community. The first is at CSU Fresno, and it's actually an exhibition that was initiated by the Brooklyn Museum of Art in 2019 to kind of commemorate the 50th anniversary of Stonewall. It's called Nobody Promised You Tomorrow, Art 50 Years After Stonewall. And it's got this incredible group of, I think, 28 artists, all born after 1969. So it's thinking about the legacy of that uprising through the lens of a kind of younger generation of artists. And so that's at Fresno State, and that actually opens on August 19th, and it runs through the end of October. And so in collaboration with CSU Fresno, Art Space Gallery is going to host a kind of satellite exhibition that brings some of the issues that are in the larger exhibition to the fore and connects them to a kind of Fresno context. So we'll have lots of different kinds of works in the gallery, including some archival material that try to kind of surface the long history of LGBTQ rights and organizing and sort of safe places in the Fresno area. We will also have a community mapping kind of public art component where we're going to be putting out a public call and asking folks to contribute to a kind of a project, a kind of a visioning project, thinking about care networks, past, present, and future in this region. So that exhibition opens on September 2nd and it will run through October 8th. And so I'm just kind of finalizing all the publicity at the moment. So do look out for emails and updates on the Art Space Gallery website. When the public call is ready, I will absolutely share it with Liz, Arian, other members of the Allied Staff and Faculty Association so that they can push that out to all of you. But I think it's going to be a really, the two shows combined are going to be a really just wonderful opportunity for folks to see the sort of incredible work and sort of diversity of the community here in Fresno and beyond, nationwide. Yeah, so let me know if you have any questions. You can always contact me directly, and I'm happy to share my email in the chat if people have questions about the show. Yeah, let me know if there's anything I didn't cover that you'd like more info on.
Thank you, Elena. And thank you everyone for coming to our safe space training. If you have any questions for Elena, please feel welcome to email her. If you have any questions for us, you're welcome to email us as well. Liz, if you could pull up the last slide of our PowerPoint just so people can see our contact information, that would be great. I want to thank the interpreters for being here today, especially Javier for interpreting for what is probably the 10th or 20th time that he's interpreted for this presentation. So thank you so much for being here and making this presentation inclusive to everybody.